Hey everybody, welcome back to the Political Science video blog series here at Politics with Roger. This is lesson number 6, entitled 1776. We have now entered into the part of the class where, or for the rest of the 101 class in this video blog series, we're pretty much just going to be discussing different political systems. The next 7 video lessons are going to be focusing on American democracy and constitutionalism. So just so you guys know what to expect, that's what's coming up. This is an introduction to American constitutionalism. And this should be a shorter discussion. What I wanted to get into about 1776 and this introduction to American constitutionalism is really just an appreciation and even a reverence for what a miracle this particular type of government that was set up in 1789 after the Revolutionary War was. And by the way, this isn't going to be a discussion about the Revolutionary War, so you can, check that out. That's a whole other video and a whole other video series, but specifically about the government and the idea that was set up after the Revolutionary War. It really was a miracle in the human experience for humanity. And the reason I say, it was a 1,000-year leap, I say in a lot of ways. And the reason I say this is because it was a totally new, not a new idea, but definitely a new government that changed the course of history forever. And the idea is what we're celebrating, and this government is what we're celebrating. For most of human history, or pretty much all of human history, people have been ruled by some form of feudalism, which is basically, the powerful ruling over the weak, or the few governing over the many, or the privileged, ruling over the underprivileged. However you want to look at it, it was very few people at the top ruling over everybody else in kind of almost like a pyramid type organizational chart, where you have, your rulers. Under them you have kind of your lords or nobles, as they were called in old Europe. And under them you had your military and industrialists for the most part. And then at the bottom is people like me, the rest of us, the little people that did all the work and labor. And we're always subject to the whims and the power of the people, quote unquote, above them. So feudalism. And this is the way the world has been governed again, pretty much since the beginning of time. This is just the way it was, and this is what the human experience was. But everything changed with the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and this all started in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence of the American colonies from the British Empire, which I'm sure all you guys know about. The only thing that ever came close to American constitutionalism was the Magna Carta, which was signed in 1215 in England. And the Magna Carta was a document. What was going on was basically there's a rebellion, a rebel uprising in England, and the King of England at the time, I think King John, was forced to basically make an agreement with the rebels, giving the rebels rights on paper. And so it was more of an agreement than it was a government. I guess that's the best way to say it. It was an agreement, but it wasn't necessarily a government, because neither side really followed any of the guidelines in the agreement, and for the most part, the Magna Carta fell apart, and we didn't have anything resembling, or we didn't have any kind of government resembling anything like the Magna Carta, where, quote unquote, the little people or the underprivileged would have rights or power until 1776, until 1789, when the American Constitution was made effective. So the way this all worked out, now in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, and we talked about that. But one of the key lines from that, and you will all recognize this, We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So just hold on to that for a second, because we'll come back to that in just a moment. In 1789, the Constitution of the United States was made effective after a few years of debate and drafts. And the Constitution of the United States included also the Bill of Rights, which was pretty self-explanatory, a bill that outlined the rights that every American citizen would have, thus making the document and the government a republic and not a majority rule pure democracy, which is very important because the Constitution of the United States and your Bill of Rights protects a certain set of rights that you have no matter what state you're in, whether you're in Florida or California or Maine or Alaska or Hawaii or wherever. The Bill of Rights protects a certain set of rights that every American has, and that's the job of the federal government, is to protect those rights. Now, the interesting thing about the Constitution and also part of the Bill of Rights was it gave the states flexibility for self-government to a certain point. They could self-govern themselves as long as they weren't infringing on the rights, as long as they weren't usurping the federally protected rights set forth by the Bill of Rights and the federal government. So it was a republic. It wasn't a pure democracy. And that is, these are the variables that made this government a great government, a great idea, and made the United States the most powerful country in the world in less than 250 years. And still to this day, the country has a lot of problems, but there is no other government like it, built on an idea like the one that we had in our Constitution. So just a quick summary. The government is for the people, not the powerful. And this was the first time in the history of the world that this idea was tried in a government. The paradigm had been completely shifted. In every government in the history of the world prior to 1776, there was a ruler and then there were subjects. And basically, the rulers owned the subjects. The American Constitution completely flipped that paradigm, where the rulers were no longer, quote unquote, the owners of the subjects, but they were the employees of the subjects. It's amazing that they're able to pull this off. And I know there's people out there saying, well, that's not how it is. The powerful still rule. The powerful and the rich still have all the benefits. And to a certain extent, that's true. We can't argue with that. But still, just the idea and the application of the Constitution completely changed the world, and people can't deny that. And it's often people that are born in the United States that don't understand what they have with the rights that they have. And we'll get into a little bit of that more over the next few lessons as we talk about some of the specific amendments and their significance, and how that empowers we the people. And that's really one of the big phrases to come back to. This Constitution empowers we the people. And there was never a document like that before in the history of the world. There was never a government like that in the history of the world. And even though not everybody benefited from that document, and not everybody was able to empower themselves with this new set of rules, it was still a revolutionary idea and a revolutionary government that we need to celebrate, we need to revere, and we certainly need to protect. Another hallmark of this government is that our rights come from our Creator. Our rights come from God. They do not come from man. Again, this is significant because before this point in time in history, it was man that ruled, and if you had rights, it was because another man gave you those rights. And this document, this government declared that your rights come from God, and that no man can take away those rights given to us by God. And that is just so significant again, that it's hard to explain, and it's hard for me to put into words in a short lesson, but it's something that I want you guys to focus on, because this is a special government that we live under here in the United States. The Constitution's a special document. The Declaration of Independence was a special document, and everything that happened after that and what was created after that was really a miracle. It's a 1,000-year leap forward. And I just can't say that enough. I mean, there's just nothing else like it in the world, and we just need to, again, celebrate that here in the United States. Again, to summarize, the federal government protects our unalienable rights given to us by God. That is its function. The moment it steps over that function, we, the people, are to put the government back in its place, not for the government to put us in our place as we, the people. Which is significant, because we have a duty as citizens of the United States of America to act when we see our government usurping their constitutional rights. It's really important, because that's what governments tend to do when they're left alone, when they're left unchecked. We're not getting into so much the separations of powers and some of the other ways this government was formed. You can check out that with the 3 branches of the government. There always had to be checks and balances against power. Well, here in the United States, under our Constitution, the citizens of the United States are a check on government power as well. And if we don't exercise that those rights and exercise that check against an overreaching federal government, then we will lose our rights. And anyway, we'll get into this in later courses and practical application, but that's the struggle that always happens. The federal government its function is to protect our unalienable rights laid out by the Bill of Rights and our amendments. And finally, the spectacular thing about this government was that it gave the states wiggle room for self-rule. It decentralized power, and that's another function of governments that really didn't exist until the American Constitution in 1776. Power was always centralized, again, in that kind of pyramid type organizational chart where the powerful consolidated all power and distributed it kind of in a trickle-down kind of fashion to the rest of the society. The way our Constitution was set up, the states are allowed to have their own power. They're allowed the wiggle room for self-rule and self-government, provided that they do not infringe on the federally protected rights of we the people, the citizens of America. So anyway, like I said, a little bit shorter lesson. This is just a introduction to the American Constitution, 1776, American democracy, the republic. And it's not the first republic in the history of the world, but it's the first time people had these kind of rights that were protected by the federal government. And again, I just, not to sound like a broken record, but this is the whole point of the lesson, that the American Constitution changed the course of history, and it created the most powerful country that the world has ever seen to this day, 2020, even though we're going through some rocky times now. And it also empowered people in this country in a way that people around the world have never been empowered before, which would also include owning private property rights. Things we'll get into more in future lessons, but it's just so dang significant, guys. And it's just something that we ought to think about and appreciate. And you'll see this when we start talking about other government systems. But even in other government systems, either the powerful rule the masses or the masses rule the powerful. And if you ask 1,000 people which they would prefer, I think almost all of them, unless they were one of the powerful, would prefer that the masses have a mandate to govern the powerful and not the other way around. And that's what we have in this country, and that's what we're protecting in this country, and that's what we're celebrating today here in video lesson number 6. Thank you for tuning in to video lesson number 6. We'll see you in video lesson number 7 where we'll talk about some of the philosophers and culture that developed our constitutional republic. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Political Science video blog series with Politics with Roger. Thanks, guys.